Hey guys, today I'm going to show you the most common opening mistake that everyone makes. So firstly, I'm going to show what is this opening mistake from the white side of the chessboard, and after that, we're going to flip the board and I'm going to show you how to punish this mistake. So this is the position and this is the mistake after move number 4 from white. Now, this position can arise from various transpositions and I will show you guys a few of those. So firstly, e4, e5, knight f3, black can play knight to f6, which is the Petrov defense. White replies with knight to c3, protecting the pawn on e4. Black plays knight c6, and now we have this 4 knights opening, where all 4 knights are developed, and white plays the move bishop to c4 here, which has happened more than 15 million times. This position can also arise from after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6 now instead, and after bishop c4, which is the Italian game, black plays knight to f6 and white plays knight to c3, which is played more than 10 million times according to the database. This position can also be obtained after e4, e5, and white starts off with knight to c3 first, which is usually the Vienna game, and after move like knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, knight f3, it is also transposes into this position, which is played 2 million times according to the Lee Chess database. So you guys can see the point. Almost 20 million or even more than that, 20 million players according to the database, or 20 million games have arrived in this particular position. But in most cases, black fail to take advantage and punish this mistake. Now, you guys might be wondering, now what is this mistake all about? So let me show you. I'm going to flip the board over here and I'm going to show you what is the move that black should play. So some of the most played moves in this position are bishop to c5, which is very natural, right? You just develop a bishop and basically you copy what it's doing. Or bishop to b4. And the idea is simple. You want to capture the knight here on c3, and after white recaptures either by the d pawn or by the b pawn anyway, we can capture this pawn on e4 because it's no longer defended. And also, there have been instances where black plays a move like pawn to h6, pawn to d6, or bishop to e7, more passive moves in this position, which has been played millions of times. But the strongest move here in this position, which is why this move bishop to c4 was a mistake, or white's decision to reach this position, regardless of whether the knight or the bishop has been played first, is a mistake because now we can play the move knight takes e4, sacrificing our knight. So white has two options. The easiest way is to recapture back on e4, and he can also play the move bishop takes f7 check. So let's first take a look at the main line, which is knight captures. So now we see the whole point of our knight sacrifice on e4 is because we can play this move pawn to d5, gaining this double attack on the knight, on the white's knight and white's bishop, and white is forced to make a choice here. Will he save the knight? Will he save the bishop? Or can he do anything else? Now, the top 3 options here for white are to retreat the bishop here to d3, bishop takes pawn, and also bishop to b5. So let's first discuss the most tricky option in my opinion, which is bishop to b5. So after bishop to b5, we just take this knight, of course, and now we see the whole idea of this bishop to b5 moves. The bishop on b5 pins our knight on c6 to the king, so white is able to play a move like knight takes e5. We can't capture because our king is underpinned from the bishop. And here, surprisingly enough, not many players know how to capitalize on this position, or not many players know what is the best move here. The most played move here is bishop d7, which is a mistake because black has way better options to play in this position. And the second most played move is queen to d5 over here, which is not bad. The queen attacks both the knight and the bishop at the same time, but black's strongest move in this position is queen to g5. So same idea, black attacks the knight, black pins the knight to the bishop as well, so it's almost like a double attack, but the black queen on g5 serves an extra purpose. It's also attacking this pawn on g2, so essentially it's like a triple attack. And now white has 2 options. He can capture this knight on c6 with the knight, or he can take with the bishop. So let's first take a look at what if he takes with the bishop. with check. So we recapture the bishop, and white will probably play knight takes pawn. And now, although we can play this nice move with queen to c5, which actually traps this knight on c6, because the knight has no safe square to go, as all the squares are covered by our pieces. This is actually not the best way to go, because white can probably play a move like knight takes pawn over here, and after we recapture with either the queen or the rook, even though we gain a piece, but white still retain 2 pawns for the knight. So he might still have some chances. So instead of queen to c5, we are going to play the move queen takes g2 in this position. And this is why queen to g5 earlier on was so important, right? Now, our queen attacks the rook on h1, and white probably only can play rook to f1 to save this rook. And now we're going to play this move bishop to g4. Our queen protects the bishop, and our bishop hits the queen, the enemy's queen on d1, and this queen is already trapped. The queen has nowhere to go, and if he plays a move like pawn to f3, we can just capture. The queen is still under attack. Even if he sacrifices the rook, we just recapture back with our pawn, and then pawn to f2 check, followed by f1 queen is totally winning for black. So let's go back over here, and bishop takes knight doesn't really work for white. So now let's see what if knight takes knight then. So now you guys have to be very careful not to recapture the knight, because the difference now is if pawn captures, white can play bishop takes c6, check, and also attacking our rook. So this would be a terrible blunder because we lose our rook in this case. So instead of taking the knight, we need to capture this bishop on b5. Now, the knight on c6 is under attack, and the knight doesn't have many squares to go to. The only available option here is to retreat back to d4. Now we swing our queen back all the way to g5, with the same idea of attacking this pawn on g2. And already it's not easy for white to find a move. Why do I say so? Because if let's say he plays a move like castling, very natural, right? But now we have this move bishop h3 threatening checkmate in 1. The pawn cannot capture because the king is in pin. And black's strat is very simple. I'm going to play queen takes g2 checkmate on the next move. White can't really defend this square on g2. The only way he can defend it is to push his pawn up. We just take this rook, and we are already exchange up in this position, let's say after queen captures, and it's a very easy position for black to play. We can play bishop c5, we can even castle queenside, and we already have this easy material advantage. So castling doesn't work. If let's see if he plays, what if he plays pawn to g3 then? Now the best engine move is actually to play bishop to g4, but as a human, I would recommend you guys to play this move bishop to h3 instead. And the idea is more simple here. We simply just prevent white from castling. White cannot castle now. There will be an illegal move because the f1 square is controlled by our bishop. So white cannot castle in this position. And the only move you have to watch out for black in this position is this sneaky move with pawn to d3. We cannot capture this pawn, and we cannot play any other move because you got to be very careful. Our queen is under attack from the bishop on c1. But don't worry, because you can just retreat the queen with a move like queen to g6. And after pawn captures, you guys can play this move castling queenside, or even rook to d1 is fine as well. Or castling, the whole idea is we want to put this rook on the d file to give this pin on the knight to the queen. And it's already a very difficult position for white to play. An important thing to note here is that if queen captures pawn, check, it looks nice at first glance because we also hit the rook in the corner, but white can play queen to e2, and now our queen is in pin to our king. We can't take the rook, we are forced to trade queens, which is why castling or rook to d8 over here is way better. And our threats still remain. We have this pin, we are still threatening queen takes pawn, giving check and winning the rook. If let's say white plays a move like pawn to f3 to defend this pawn on e4, now we already have pawn to c5, and we win this knight no matter what because the knight can't move as the queen will be under attack. So this is, in my opinion, a very simple way to continue. Now going back over here, I'm just going to show you guys this move bishop to g4 and what would be the outcome of the position according to the engine, because Stockfish prefers this bishop to g4 move slightly over the move bishop to h3. So after bishop to g4, the queen is under attack. White probably has to play a move like pawn to f3, because if he plays a move like knight to e2, that is very bad for white because now he voluntarily puts his knight in pin, and as black we could probably play a move like bishop to f3 to hit the rook, or even queen to h5 to double up along this diagonal. So pawn to f3 captures, knight captures. The computer say queen to e7 check is the best move here, and after move like king to f2 castling. Do note that all these moves are some of the top engine moves, so I'm just showing you guys what this position could be. So bishop e3, computer says pawn to f6 is the best move, queen up, and pawn to h5. And if you run this position in a stronger engine, like stock 316 at a higher depth, it says that black is winning by -3. Although right now, at the moment, as black we have no material advantage, but black says that the computer says that black is just completely winning, which is why over here, instead of bishop to g4, as a human, I would recommend playing bishop to h3, which is way easier. But of course, if you like to explore the line of bishop g4, you're free to do so. Alright, so let's go back to the main line in this position, and we have discussed the most tricky option, which was bishop to b5. Now let's take a look at the most played option, which is bishop takes pawn. So here we play queen takes, attacking the knight. White has two options. He can either play pawn to d3 or knight to c3, and both options are fine for us. For example, after knight to c3, we retreat our queen to d6 because our queen move on d6 has a really nice idea. Because now, if for example white plays castling, we have bishop to g4, getting this nice pin on the knight to the queen, and we also have, for example, knight to d4 threats in the future. So this might be very unpleasant for white. He might play pawn, which is why white might play the move pawn to h3, and now we can see the idea of queen to d6, because now we can play this move queen to g6, attacking this pawn on g2, and a similar idea in the previous variation where white played the tricky move with bishop to b5. If white castles, we can just capture this pawn on h3, threatening checkmate on next move. So already, it's not that easy for white to play. If he plays a move like knight to b5, trying to attack this pawn over here, we just play bishop to d6 and there's no problems in our position. Alright, so moving back, besides knight to c3, white can also play this move pawn to d3, supporting the knight and also freeing up the bishop for future development, either to g5, maybe to e3 or to d2. And now we just have to play this move bishop to g4. Again, same idea, pinning this knight to the queen, because remember, we already won the white's light square bishop in the first place, where the bishop was on c4, so now white has no light square bishop to contest our bishop, and there's no bishop to go back to e2 to defend this pin. And this position should be very easy for black to play. For example, after castling, we can even castle queenside, followed by attacks like knight to d4, utilizing this pin, or even pawn to f5, targeting this knight, followed, and after, if the knight moves, we can even play the move pawn to e4 to attack along the d file and this pin, this really annoying pin on this knight. So black should have no problems in this position. Okay, so we have seen bishop b5 and bishop takes, and now let's look at bishop d3, which is the best reply for white according to the engine. So after bishop d3, we just take the knight, bishop captures, and we're going to play this move bishop to d6. We need to play bishop to d6 because white is threatening to capture our knight on c6, and after pawn takes, that will leave this pawn hanging. Maybe white can't capture at the moment, but he might be able to do it in the future, which is why we just play bishop to d6 to protect this e5 pawn. And after castling, we can castle. If white plays a move like pawn to d3, very natural, trying to bring the bishop out somewhere. Now our idea for black is very simple again. We are going to play this move bishop to g4. We always have this annoying pin. And later on, we also can play knight to d4. We can even push up our f pawn as well, pawn to f5, followed by pawn to e4. So in this position, if white plays pawn to h3 first, taking away the g4 square for our bishop, that's also not a problem because now we have a really nice computer move with knight to b4. This move might seem very weird, but let me show you the idea. So if we play pawn to f5 now, if white plays bishop to d3, we just play pawn to e4, and that's easy because we just win a piece. But white can play bishop to d5, giving our king check first. So in this case, we can't win any piece, which is why the computer suggests this move knight to b4 because the knight covers this d5 square, and now our threat is to play pawn to f5 followed by pawn to e4. And if white plays a move like, let's say, pawn to c3, that's the best move according to the engine. We just play pawn to f5, attacking the bishop. If pawn takes knight, we just take the bishop, and we're very happy with this because the knight has to retreat somewhere, either to h2 or to e1. Both are not really good for white. We can also capture this pawn later, and we have this nice bishop pair. And so, according to the engine, the best move here is bishop to b1, another weird looking move, which is the whole reason why computer said pawn to c3 was best, because white could retreat the bishop this way. So, but that's not a problem because we just move back our knight as well, and our position as black is very solid and very strong with strong attacking chances. We can play pawn to e4, hitting the knight. We can play queen to f6 as well, followed by queen to g6, try to utilize the g and fr, and also there's no worry about queen to b3 check because we can just move the king to h8, so that's not a problem. Okay, now last but not least, we've already seen the main line with knight captures, pawn to d5, and then three main options with the bishop for white. So now we have to see what if white plays this move bishop takes f7. So this move is also important because white may try to be clever. He might think that if he captures the knight, pawn to d5, he loses the piece anyway, right? So what if he plays bishop takes f7 check first, forcing us to capture with our king, and now he recaptures with the knight, and essentially the pieces are still equal, but our king is on f7 and might be weak and we can't castle in the future. But that's not a problem for us as well because we just play pawn to d5. We have this really nice center pawns on e5 and d5, which also activates our bishop later on. If white plays a move like knight to g5 check, we hide our king here on g8. Now this might seem like a really bad position for black, but don't worry because as you guys can see, the computer evaluation on the left shows that black is already advantaged with -1. And let me show you why. So the most played move now here is pawn to d3 because we are just simply threatening to go pawn to e4 on the next move, and we're going to attack the knight. The knight on f3 is guarding this knight on g5 as well, so if the knight moves, we can just capture this knight with our queen. So pawn to d3, we just play pawn to h6, kicking this knight away. Knight retreats here to h3. Of course we can capture this knight on h3 now, but you just gotta be careful because if captures, white might try and utilize this g file to attack our king, and he can just castle queenside with moves like, for example, bishop d2, queen e2, and then just castle queenside. So of course you can go for this variation if you like it, but I'm going to recommend you this even stronger move with bishop to g4. And again, the idea is always the same. We always have this nice pin on the white's knight to the queen, and our next move is very simple. Our idea for our next move is simple. We're going to play pawn to e4 and we're going to win this knight on f3. So the most played move here, according to database, is knight h to g1, trying to protect this knight this way. We play pawn to e4 anyways, and after captures, white plays queen takes queen, trading the queens. We just recapture back with the rook, and now the position is really very dangerous. If let's say very dangerous for white, because if let's say the knight moves here, rook to d1 is already checkmate because our bishop got the rook. So if he plays a move like knight to d2, trying to take away the d1 square for a rook, we can play knight to d4 instead, and the threat of knight takes c2 is just too strong and there's no way for white to defend. And as you guys can see from the pieces, white's pieces are all kinda undeveloped, whereas our bishop, our knight, our rook is really strong. Our bishop can also join the attack with like bishop b4, bishop to c5 in one move. Even though our rook looks like it's stuck in the corner, right now it's not really stuck because we can just develop bishop, move the king up, and then play our rook up anywhere. So it's a really easy position for black. And there's one more move over here which I need to show. If white plays a move like pawn to h3, trying to attack our bishop, because now if we move the bishop back, he might have pawn to g4. Of course, this position is still way better for black. We just move the bishop back, and if he captures, we can even recapture with the bishop. This is no problem for black whatsoever, but we also can capture this knight over here, and after pawn captures bishop, we capture on g2, attacking the rook. Let's say white plays the move like rook to h2. We have this really nice idea from the engine, which is to play this move queen to e8 check. Now, of course the king can move to d2, but that doesn't look good for white at all. And if white blocks with the knight, we can actually play g1 queen here, and because the knight can't capture our queen as it's in pin. So quite a funny position, which is why he has to play this move queen to e2. And our whole idea of queen to e8 is not that we want to trade queens, but we are going to play this very sneaky queen to d7 move because we want to now swing our rook over to e8 to pin the queen to the king. And already it's very difficult for white to play because if he plays a move like bishop to e3, this doesn't really help and protect the white queen at all because we can play pawn to d4, kicking away this bishop. If the bishop moves somewhere, we just play rook to e8 and he loses queen. And if the bishop don't move, we can just capture the bishop on the next move. And that's all for this video. Congratulations on learning this common opening mistake. If you're interested in learning 10 opening traps to win the free queen, then click on this video. Thanks for watching, and we see you in the next video.